When you lose someone, they tell you to brace for the silence. But no one warns you about the noise. The voicemail blinking with sympathy. The paperwork rustling like dry leaves. The clang of a spoon in a coffee cup you're not hungry enough to drink. My name is Danica Rowe. And 43 days ago, my husband Jonathan died of a sudden cardiac arrest in the middle of the night. Just gone. One minute we were arguing over whether the dishwasher needed unloading, and the next, I was kneeling on the floor screaming into a 911 call that no one was answering fast enough. We'd been married for 11 years. Lived in the same house for 9. A modest 3-bedroom just outside of Asheville, with maple trees that turned gold in the fall and a backyard we never got around to fixing. He was an engineer. Meticulous. Quiet. Good with numbers, terrible with birthdays. I thought I knew everything there was to know about him. Until I opened that garage. The first month after the funeral felt like treading water with bricks tied to my feet. Everyone had questions, about the will, the accounts, the burial, the medical records, but no one seemed to care how I was doing. And honestly, I didn't either. I existed in task mode: cancel his gym membership, notify his HR, change the car title, call his mother, who by the way, never liked me and made sure I knew it at every turn. "You'll be fine," she sniffed at the funeral. He hadn't spoken to her in 3 years. But sure, she was the authority on grief. The only thing I didn't touch was the garage. It stood like a sealed vault beside our house, weathered windowless, and locked with a stubborn padlock. John always called it his sanctuary. He fixed bikes in there, or so I thought. Sometimes I'd see the flicker of light under the door late at night when I went to bed alone while he unwound. I didn't question it. You don't when you think someone's a good man. But when the second mortgage bill arrived with his signature on it, one I never knew existed, I started wondering what else I didn't know. That's when I found the garage key. It wasn't in a drawer or a box. It was in the back of a hollowed-out book, a copy of the Odyssey. The symbolism didn't hit me until much later. The door creaked open with the kind of sound that makes your stomach twist. I expected dust. Cobwebs. Maybe some broken tools and his old mountain bike. What I got was silence, and then, chaos. There were walls of file cabinets, each one labeled in John's handwriting. Blueprints. Bank documents. Fake IDs. And pictures. Thousands of pictures. Not of me. Not of us. But of her. The same woman. Over and over. Candid photos from across the street. From inside stores. From parking lots. She was older. Maybe 50? Dark hair. Sometimes with a young boy. I didn't recognize her. But clearly, John had been obsessed. Pinned on a corkboard at the back of the garage was a photo I couldn't look away from. Him. Her. And the boy. At a beach. Smiling. My knees gave out. I stayed there, sitting on the concrete floor for hours. I don't know how long. My ears rang with the sound of my own breath. I wanted to believe it was some kind of research project. A mistaken identity. Anything. But I knew better. One of the file folders was labeled Rowan, Custody Options. Rowan. The boy. Inside was a birth certificate. Father, Jonathan Hale Whitmore. My husband. The man I'd buried 5 weeks earlier. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of our bed, my bed now, rereading every piece of paper I'd pulled from that garage. There were records going back 10 years. Payments. Letters. Photos. He'd kept everything. He was supporting this other family. They lived 2 towns over. He visited once a week under the excuse of volunteer work at a non-profit he never actually worked for. He'd even paid for the boys' private school tuition, while telling me we couldn't afford a vacation. There were voice memos on an old phone I found taped under the workbench. And I listened to every single one. His voice. Calm. Matter of fact. Rowan's doing well in school. I wish I could be more present, but it's risky. Danica's getting suspicious. No. I wasn't. Not until now. I could have burned it all. Pretended I never saw any of it. Let him stay perfect in death the way so many widows are forced to. But I couldn't. Not after what came next. Because among the documents was a sealed envelope, addressed to me. In his handwriting. Labeled, in case of my death. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was one sentence. Danica, I never meant to hurt you. Please don't go looking for her. There was no apology. No explanation. Just that. So I made a choice. I was going to find her. And I was going to find out why he spent 10 years lying to me. And what else he was hiding behind that perfect husband mask. Because if I was going to grieve someone, I needed to know who the hell I had actually married. I always thought betrayal was something loud. Explosive. The kind of thing that came crashing into your life like a storm through stained glass. But it turns out, sometimes it's quiet. It hides in file folders. In names you've never said out loud. In beach photos of people you've never met, taken by the man you thought only had eyes for you. Her name was Margot Lane. I found it scribbled at the bottom of a payment receipt for a private clinic, dated 3 years ago. She wasn't his assistant. Or an old flame. Or someone from his past. She was the mother of his son. And he'd been paying her, quietly, consistently, for nearly a decade. I couldn't sleep for days after the discovery in the garage. My body moved like a machine, but my brain was screaming. Screaming because I didn't know whether I was mourning a man or a stranger. I kept looking at our wedding photos. He looked happy. Not fake happy. Not forced. Just content. So how could that be real, and what he had with her be real too? Had he been living 2 lives the entire time? I needed answers. Not for closure. Not for peace. But because I was starting to question everything. Every trip. Every late work night. Every missing dollar I chalked up to taxes or saving setbacks. The first time I saw her in person, I nearly turned around and drove off. Margot's house was small. Quaint. Blue shutters. A tricycle on the porch. There was a yellow tulip painted on the mailbox, the same tulip that Jonathan once carved into our backyard bench. And there she was. She stepped outside with a glass of lemonade in one hand and a phone in the other, pausing on the porch like she sensed something. She was older than I expected, late 40s maybe, with tired eyes and a sun-worn face. She didn't look like a threat. She looked like someone who had also been lied to. I rang the doorbell. She answered, blinking, studying me. Can I help you? I swallowed. My name is Danica Rowe. I was Jonathan Whitmore's wife. Her expression shattered. Like I'd hit her with a brick. She didn't ask how he died. She didn't ask who I was again. She just stepped back and opened the door. We sat in her kitchen, silent, while her son Rowan played in the living room with headphones on. He looked about 9. Same jawline as John. Same furrowed brows when he concentrated. I thought he'd left you a letter, Margot said finally. He did, I whispered. But it wasn't for you. She nodded like she expected that. He was always afraid of tying loose ends. Always preferred things unfinished, that way they couldn't unravel. I stared at her. You knew about me? She didn't blink. Of course I did. He talked about you constantly. Said you were strong. Smarter than him. I couldn't breathe. And you stayed with him anyway? Her eyes welled. I didn't stay with him. I tolerated him. For my son. Jonathan made promises. Paid for the school. Covered medical bills. But he wasn't mine. He never really was. Then why not tell me? Margot folded her hands. Because I was afraid he'd take Rowan from me. You didn't know what he was capable of. He had control over everything. That stopped me. Wait. What do you mean? Capable of? She stood up. Walked over to a drawer. Pulled out a thick envelope. He never told you about the other one, did he? The what? She slid the envelope across the table. Inside were legal documents. Custody records. Guardianship clauses. One was a drafted will, and signed, naming Rowan as the sole heir, on the condition that I was declared mentally unfit. What the hell is this? Insurance, she said coldly. In case you ever found out. I don't remember leaving the house. I just remember throwing up behind the wheel of my car, shaking so hard I nearly dropped my phone. My husband, the man I kissed goodnight 1,000 times, had created a backup plan that erased me like I was disposable. Why? That question wouldn't let me sleep. Until I found the real answer. Back at the house, I tore through the garage again. There had to be more. More than just documents and photos and secrets. I emptied every drawer, overturned every file cabinet. And then I saw it. A floorboard, slightly off-kilter. Under it was a safe. I knew the combination. It was our wedding date. Inside were two things. A USB drive. A sealed letter addressed to his lawyer. My heart stuttered. The USB had a name. Vault 6 proof. I plugged it in. And what I saw changed everything. Videos. Audio clips. Financial spreadsheets with coded notes. It was insurance. But not for him. Not for me. For someone else entirely. Jonathan wasn't just a man with two families. He was embezzling from his employer. Creating fake shell companies. Routing funds through accounts in both our names, and Margot's. Which meant one thing. If anyone found out, we would take the fall. Not him. He built it that way. Smart. Clean. Untraceable, unless you knew what to look for. I took the documents straight to his attorney. Not to expose him. Not yet. But to see if he knew. The look on his face when I slid the USB across the desk? That told me he didn't. Danica, he said quietly, if this is real, it implicates multiple people. Including you. Including your assets. My what? I snapped. Your house. Your savings. Your retirement account. I stared at him. Jonathan had access to none of that, I whispered. He turned the screen toward me. A wire transfer. 2 months before he died. $180,000 moved, from an account in my name, to a numbered shell company in the Cayman Islands. And that's when it hit me. Jonathan didn't just betray me. He used me. He left behind a mess so tangled, so intentional, that if I hadn't found the garage, I would have walked right into prison with a widow's smile on my face. But now? Now I knew the truth. And I wasn't going to cry anymore. I wasn't going to play the grieving wife. I was going to burn it all down, in public. And make sure Jonathan Whitmore was remembered for who he really was. Not a loving husband. Not a generous father. But a coward who built his empire on lies, and thought I'd never find the key. Grief makes people expect you to disappear. They nod when you go silent. They accept when you cancel. They call you strong when you don't cry in public, even though inside, you're choking on every truth you're too stunned to speak. But I wasn't shocked anymore. I was wide awake. The man I married, Jonathan Whitmore, didn't just live a double life. He left me with a ticking time bomb made of forged documents, offshore accounts, and 2 separate families tangled in criminal paper trails. And everyone expected me to fold. But I'd spent too long playing the quiet wife. The dutiful spouse. The woman who made excuses for late nights and missing receipts. I wasn't just grieving anymore. I was planning. The first thing I did was call the bank. Hi, this is Danica Rowe. I need to put a freeze on all accounts associated with my name. Yes, even the trust fund. Yes, immediately. The woman on the phone tried to stall me. Are you sure, ma'am? That account was initiated by Mr. Whitmore as part of. I said freeze it. And just like that, $280,000 of his money stopped moving. Whatever schemes he set in motion, they were about to grind to a halt. The next call was to the IRS. I scheduled a whistleblower appointment anonymously. The man who once bragged about making taxes vanish legally had used my identity as one of the names behind his shell corporations. But now? That paper trail was leading them back to him, even if he was 6 feet under. But that was only the beginning. I still hadn't touched the sealed envelope I found addressed to his attorney. I wanted to open it, badly. But something told me not to. So I drove to the law office again. Dropped it on his desk like a time-delayed grenade. Before you open that, I said, I need to know something. If Jonathan committed crimes under my name, what happens to me? The lawyer, a wiry man named Clay Lorman, adjusted his glasses and sat back. It depends. If you can prove you didn't know, and show a willingness to assist the investigation, the government may offer immunity. But you'll have to be very careful. Jonathan was meticulous. I nodded slowly. Yeah. That's one word for him. He opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter, notarized. It was brief. If you're reading this, I'm dead. Protect Danica. She doesn't know anything. Make sure she keeps what's hers. Clay looked up. This could help you. But I didn't feel relieved. I felt manipulated. Even in death, he wanted to control the narrative. He played the hero in a letter about crimes I didn't even know existed. He was shielding me to look noble. Not because he loved me. And that's when it clicked. He still thought he could write the ending. But I wasn't going to just survive this. I was going to expose it. Publicly. The first person I went to was Rowan's school principal. Not because I wanted to hurt the boy, never, but because I needed to verify where Jonathan's secret money was going. I told her the truth. I'm his father's legal widow. I need to know if the tuition was paid through a third-party fund. She looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Whitmore, we really can't disclose. I dropped a flash drive on her desk. This is evidence of embezzled funds being funneled through private education programs. If you don't help me, I'm taking it to the state board. She paled. And within an hour, I had the paperwork. Jonathan had used his company's non-profit grant fund to pay for Rowan's school. Which meant Margot had no idea her son's education was built on fraud. It made me sick. Not because Rowan got the money. But because if the school got investigated, he'd be punished, not John. That was the first time I hesitated. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice, without wrecking innocent people on the way down. So I made a list. People who needed to know the truth. Margot, she had to understand what she was entangled in. Jonathan's former employer, their silence made them complicit. His adoring friends and colleagues, they needed to see who they'd actually been praising. And the community that read his obituary like a saint had died. I wasn't going to scream. I was going to show. I started with Margot. She answered the door like she hadn't slept. I found more, I told her. It's bad. She didn't flinch. Inside, I laid out the IRS letters, the forged transactions, the education payments, everything. Why are you showing me this? She whispered. Because your name is on some of it. And because I think John set you up as a fall guy in case this ever came out. She swallowed hard. I didn't know, Danica. I swear to God. I believe you, I said gently. But you need to protect yourself. And your son. Then I told her my plan. The public meeting. The presentation. The full reveal. Her eyes widened. You're really going to do this? I nodded. He doesn't get to own the story anymore. The Eastwood Business Hall of Legacy was hosting a commemorative event in Jonathan's honor. Of course they were. He donated over $50,000 to the Community Startup Fund before his death. They planned to unveil a plaque, give a speech, even name a scholarship after him. I RSVP'd under a fake name. Then I contacted the local newspaper. And 2 days before the event, I sent them a full anonymous dossier. The day of the ceremony, I wore black. Not for mourning. For war. I waited in the back row as they showed a slideshow. His achievements. His awards. His devotion to ethical engineering. I almost laughed. Then came the moment. Before we reveal the plaque, the host said, "We'd like to open the floor to anyone who knew Jonathan and would like to speak." I stood. All eyes turned. And I walked slowly down the aisle like it was a funeral again, only this time, I wasn't the widow they expected. I was the reckoning. I was Jonathan Whitmore's wife, I began, voice calm. I loved him. Trusted him. And after he died, I tried to sell the garage he left behind. Whispers. Shifts in seats. In that garage, I found the truth. Not about me. About him. Then I showed the flash drive. And plugged it into the projector. Photos. Ledgers. Wire transfers. Multiple passports. Names. Receipts. Emails. Each slide peeling back a piece of the mask he'd worn. The room fell dead silent. He wasn't just living a double life, I said. He was stealing. Lying. And dragging innocent people down with him, including me. Gasps. A woman in the front row burst into tears. One man stood and stormed out. The plaque? They didn't unveil it. They took it down. The newspaper ran the story that same night. Local engineer's widow exposes double life and financial crimes at public tribute. Suddenly, Jonathan's name wasn't in lights anymore. It was under investigation. I didn't do it for applause. Or revenge. Or pity. I did it so no one else would be tricked into thinking silence is dignity. So the next widow would know. If a door is locked, open it. If something feels off, trust it. And if they leave behind secrets, don't bury them with the body. You don't get a round of applause for telling the truth. You get silence. You get whispers. And then, you get war. After I exposed Jonathan's double life and the evidence I found in the garage, I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow. The tribute ceremony was cancelled. His scholarship fund was frozen. His name scraped off the honor wall like it had never meant anything. But the fallout didn't end there. It came in emails from strangers, in calls from his family, and in a letter that I never expected. The first to reach out was his mother. Margaret Whitmore had always seen me as a placeholder. A woman too opinionated, too modern, not what she wanted for her golden boy. And now that golden boy was tarnished, and she needed someone to blame. You shame your husband in front of the entire city, she hissed over the phone. You humiliate his memory? What's wrong with you, Danica? What's wrong with me? I snapped. He stole from people. Lied to me. Lived a secret life for 10 years, Margaret. Or don't you think Rowan's education came out of thin air? Silence. She hadn't known. That shut her up, for a moment. Then came the legal threats. A cease and desist letter landed in my mailbox 2 days later, written by her new lawyer. Defamation, it claimed. Emotional distress. Public character assassination. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the envelope. Because attached to it was a request to release Jonathan's storage unit, a place I didn't even know existed. I called the lawyer immediately. Nice try, I told him. But if my name's still on the estate, I'll be the one opening it. And I did. The unit was 30 miles out of town, in a remote part of Blue Ridge where he told me he'd once stored old furniture for his late uncle. When the manager unlocked the door, I braced for more secrets. And I got them. There were boxes, dozens, labeled in code. Inside were letters, blueprints, even more documents. But most of it wasn't about his finances. It was about me. There were transcripts of therapy notes. Printouts of my old social media posts. A notebook titled, Danica, Risk Factors. Every page was filled with annotations about my moods, my habits, my fertility records, which he should have never had access to. I flipped through the pages, trembling. Cycle irregularities noted. Possible endometriosis? Push-off talk of IVF. She suspects something after bank call, distract with anniversary trip. Increased independence, must isolate slowly. I felt like I was reading a stalker's journal. Only the stalker was my own husband. I called Margot. Did Jonathan ever track you? Keep files on you? She hesitated. He was calculated. He asked a lot of personal questions. Once I found him standing outside my job without warning. I thought it was protective. Looking back now, her voice broke. It wasn't. Neither of us said it out loud, but we were both thinking it. Jonathan hadn't just been living a double life. He had been managing us. Like assets. Like liabilities. And now, I had proof. I sent the therapy notes and fertility records to my attorney. He confirmed what I already knew, they were illegally obtained. Medical privacy laws had been breached. If I wanted to, I could sue his estate. But I didn't want money. I wanted truth. And then, right when I thought I had finally uncovered everything, a letter arrived. No name. No return address. Just a crisp cream envelope slipped through my door one rainy evening. I opened it slowly. Inside were just 4 lines. You were never supposed to find the garage. You were supposed to sell the house and leave. He didn't do all this alone. Meet me where he took you for your 10th anniversary. No phones. No recording. Just truth. My hands shook. I hadn't told anyone where we went for our 10th anniversary. It was a quiet little vineyard in Flat Creek. A place John chose last minute. We stayed one night. He was restless the entire time. I'd assumed it was stress. Now I wondered what he was hiding that night. I didn't sleep. I paced. I replayed every second of our trip. What if it was a trap? What if this was a bluff? But something told me it wasn't. Because the handwriting? I'd seen it before. It matched one of the post-it notes I found in the garage, a note not written by John, but by someone else. I drove out early the next morning. The vineyard hadn't changed. Still small, charming, quiet. Still offered the same honey-soaked toast and lavender wine. And there, under the same gazebo we'd stood in years ago, was a woman. Late 40s. Grey coat. Pale skin. And eyes that looked like they hadn't rested in years. "You came," she said. "I don't know why," I replied. "Yes, you do." She motioned for me to sit. "My name is Willa. I was Jonathan's first fiancée." I froze. What? We were engaged when we were 26. Didn't last long. He changed after a while. Got cold. Controlling. When I broke it off, he swore I'd regret it. That I didn't understand what I was walking away from. "Why are you here now?" She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. "Because I helped him build the first company he ever used to launder money. Because I was young. And in love. And stupid. And because when I threatened to go to the police after we broke up, he sent someone after me." I stared at her, stunned. "I disappeared," she said. "Changed my name. Moved 3 states over. Started over. But when I saw the article about you, about the garage, I knew he hadn't changed." My throat tightened. "Why tell me this now?" "Because there's one more storage unit. The one that matters. The one he really kept hidden." She handed me a key. I couldn't go back there alone. I took it. Not because I trusted her, not yet. But because if there was still more he had hidden, I wasn't going to stop until every rotten piece of him was in the light. And this time? I wasn't walking in alone. Some people haunt you in death. Others orchestrate their legacy like a chess match from the grave. Jonathan wasn't just hiding lies in metal cabinets and bank transfers. He was hiding a strategy. One that moved through people. One that didn't die when his heart stopped beating. And now? The final move was mine. With the key Willa gave me, the one she said led to his real storage unit, I had one last place to go. One more vault to open. One more secret to bleed dry before I buried this nightmare for good. And I wasn't going alone. Willa and I didn't talk much on the drive. There was a strange bond between us, not friendship, not alliance, but understanding. We'd both been fooled by the same man. Manipulated. Broken down and turned into pieces on a board he thought he could control. But Willa? She wasn't fragile. She'd been running for years, watching from a distance. And when she spoke, it was with the kind of clarity that only comes from surviving a monster. He always had escape plans, she said, eyes fixed on the road. Always had someone else to take the fall. And he always kept leverage. On everyone. And this place? I asked. This was his nuclear option. If everything went wrong. The storage facility was in a remote, industrial part of Greenwood, the kind of place that didn't ask questions or keep digital records. Just rusty locks and thick silence. Unit 104. The key slid in with ease. I held my breath as Willa lifted the door. And we stared. It wasn't like the garage. It wasn't cluttered or messy or even full. It was a clean, temperature-controlled archive. File drawers. Labeled boxes. A fingerprint-locked safe bolted to the floor. And in the center, a single table with a sealed envelope resting under a spotlight. My name was on it. Danica Rowe, do not open until everything falls apart. Willa gave me space. My fingers shook as I broke the seal. Inside were 3 items. A printed email thread with someone named Gregory S. Langston. A notarized document listing me as a co-founder of a Cayman Islands investment firm. And a handwritten letter. The letter read, "You were always smarter than I wanted you to be. If you're reading this, then everything's unraveling. Gregory will protect you, he owes me. But only if you stay quiet. Walk away, Danica. Let the truth rot in silence. Or you'll learn what I kept buried about you. I dropped the paper. What does that mean? I whispered. Willa was already reading the email thread. Gregory Langston. He was a federal compliance officer. Then he left government work and joined the private sector. Became John's cleaner. The emails were encrypted transcripts. Codes. Phrases like cover asset traces and use the wife's ID again, she won't notice. He'd been laundering through me with help. A former government official was protecting him, and probably others, in return for silence and payouts. It went deeper than I ever imagined. The fingerprint safe took us hours to crack. Willa had old prints from an object Jonathan had given her years ago. We wrapped a latex film around it and prayed. Click. Inside the safe were 5 thick binders and a burner phone. Each binder had a label. Langston. Margot. Willa. Danica. Rowan. The Rowan file made my stomach turn. It had school records, behavioral notes, and custody projections, like he was planning how to legally own the boy. The one with my name? It had everything. Medical history. Scans I never consented to. Recordings. A journal he'd written, titled, Danica, Final Phase. Inside were entries. She's asking too many questions. Willa has become a liability. If Danica discovers Willa, use the vineyard memory as a redirect. Feed her breadcrumbs. Margot is slipping, Plan C, transfer child guardianship posthumously. And then, if everything fails, flip the narrative. Let her expose me. I'll be dead. She'll be exhausted. And in the end, she'll be the face of the damage. That's her purpose. He planned for everything. Even this. Even his own destruction. But not this. Not me, reading those words and choosing not to be his final casualty. Willa looked up from her own file. He had insurance on me. If I'd spoken sooner, he had evidence lined up to make me look like the ringleader. He was never afraid of dying, I murmured. He was afraid of not controlling the story. I picked up the burner phone. One number was saved. No name. I called it. A man's voice answered. Cold. Measured. This is Langston. I didn't speak. But he knew. You shouldn't have found this, he said. You shouldn't have touched my life, I replied. But now I'm going to dismantle yours. Click. I didn't wait. I handed the binders to Willa. We're going to the press. Everything. The offshore records, the cover-ups, the forged identities. She hesitated. Are you sure? This will ruin everyone tied to him. Margot. Rowan. I'll protect them. But I won't protect this anymore. That night, I met with my attorney. By morning, we were sitting in the offices of The Observer, one of the state's most respected investigative outlets. They had a reputation for publishing what no one else dared. We laid out the files. The recordings. The burner phone. The patterns of financial abuse and the weaponized manipulation. They were stunned. This goes beyond a scandal, the lead reporter whispered. This is systemic. If we run this, people in high places will fall. Then let them fall, I said. He built this empire on lies. It's time someone leveled it. They published the article 3 weeks later. The Whitmore Files, a dead man's web of fraud, betrayal, and one widow's war for truth. The fallout was immediate. Gregory Langston was indicted. Investigations opened into the non-profit Jonathan used to hide his theft. Margot was cleared, and granted full legal protection. Willa was finally safe to stop running. And me? I didn't hide. I stood in front of cameras. In courtrooms. At memorials that quietly removed his name from walls. I told the truth. Not because I was brave. But because no one else ever gave me the whole story, and I decided it would end with me. They say closure is a door. But what they don't tell you is that sometimes, it opens inward. Quietly. Slowly. Like the sound of your own breath returning to your lungs after a long, cruel winter. The truth didn't save me. It unmade me. But it also gave me something I never thought I'd have again, myself. Not Jonathan's wife. Not the victim. Not the tragic widow. Just Danica Rowe. Finally free from a story I never chose to be part of. After the article dropped and the indictments rolled in, I thought that would be it. The final chapter. The end of the road. But grief has aftershocks. And so does the truth. The house didn't feel like mine anymore. Every corner reminded me of the man who curated his entire life around lies. I didn't want to keep it, not because of the memories, but because of what had happened beneath its roof. Because of what he built in secret while I folded laundry and dreamed about children he never wanted. So I sold it. I packed up every photo, every journal, every untouched part of our life and drove away with the windows down. I didn't cry. I didn't even look back. I moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. Nothing fancy. But clean. Quiet. Mine. I planted herbs on the windowsill. Took walks at sunrise. Got a part-time job helping at the local historical archive, something I'd always dreamed of doing, but never had the time for because Jonathan always needed me to handle things at home. Now? I was home. But just when I started breathing again, the past knocked on my door one last time. It came in a plain white envelope. No return address. But inside? A folded piece of notebook paper, aged and yellow at the edges. There was no greeting. No signature. Just 5 words written in a loose, shaking hand. I tried to warn you. And below it, a photo. A grainy image of me and Jonathan, standing outside a cafe. Smiling. But it wasn't taken by a friend. Or a family member. It was taken from a distance. Through glass. On the back, a date. March 14th, 2016. I stared at it for a long time. Because I remembered that day. It was our 3rd anniversary. He'd taken me to lunch after forgetting my birthday the week before. He bought me flowers. Apologized. Told me I was his center. But someone had been watching. I called Willa. This sounds like her, she said after I read the note aloud. Who? The woman he cut off. Before me. Before Margot. Someone he called the original risk. You never told me about her. I barely knew anything. Just that she left town, changed her name, and sent him a voicemail once, warning him to leave you alone. What happened to her? She vanished. That night, I sat by my window and stared out at the lights. There were layers to Jonathan even now. People I would never meet. Decisions that would keep unraveling long after the headlines faded. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Because I didn't need to know everything. I had what mattered. Proof. Freedom. Peace. And the power to decide what I wanted my next chapter to be. I started speaking publicly. At women's centers. At survivor panels. At widow support groups. And the one thing I said every time was this. If something feels off, trust it. If a door is locked, open it. And if the truth costs you everything, let it. Because it's better to lose the lie than live inside it. 6 months after the article broke, I got a letter from Margot. A thank you card. Inside it was a photo of Rowan holding a certificate. Honor roll. She wrote, he's doing well. He's starting to understand what strength looks like, and that sometimes, telling the truth is the bravest thing a person can do. You gave him that. I cried. Not because of Jonathan. Not because of regret. But because for the first time, I wasn't alone in the truth. 1 year to the day after I opened that garage, I walked past the property again. It had been renovated. The new owners built a garden where the garage used to stand. Fresh flowers. New soil. Sunlight where secrets used to rot. I stood there for a long time. Then I smiled. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't justice. It's healing in spite of them.